Welcome to the Voice of Retail. I'm your host, Michael LeBlanc. This podcast is brought to you in conjunction with Retail Council of Canada and sponsored by Engagement Agents. Engagement Agents makes it easy for retailers to engage their shopping center's marketing channels in order to promptly drive a return on engagement. First up in this episode, recorded in front of a live audience from the main stage at RCC's Bricks and Mortar Forum in November, retail insider and author of the Canadian Shopping Cen 2019 report, Craig Patterson and I talk about the genesis of his passion for retail, shopping mall trends, and what we learned from this year's report. Next, engagement agent Snyder talks about how retailers can win partnering with shopping malls to drive footsteps to their stores by leveraging his platform to improve workflow consistency and optimize the distribution of marketing campaigns. But first, let's listen into my conversation live from the main stage with Craig Patterson.
On behalf of Engagement Agents, the official sponsor of the 2019 Shopping Center study, I'm honored to introduce our next speakers. We're joined by Craig Patterson, Editor-in-Chief of Retail Insider, and Michael LeBlanc, Voice of Retail podcast host and producer and senior retailer advisor to the Retail Council of Canada. Craig is returning to discuss with Michael the latest findings and trends from the Retail Council of Canada's 2019 Shopping Center study. Welcome, Craig and Michael.
I'm good. This side? I'll take this side. So as you can see, we're going to be podcasting our interview together. So let's have a round of applause for both the Voice of Retail podcast and Craig, you now have a podcast as well, Retail Insider Podcast. Hello, everybody. So global media baron, trusted advisor, the ultimate retail insider, a man who needs little or no introduction to this audience. You know, I wanted to start out with just a little bit about what is it and where did you get your passion for retail? You're one of the most passionate advocates of retail I've ever met. Where did that stem from?
It's probably OCD. But no, seriously, I grew up in a small town in Alberta, and I was always kind of interested in big city life, and part of that was retail. And, you know, one of the cool moms in town on the military base I lived on brought a Toronto Life magazine that focused on retail in Toronto, and I found it quite fascinating, and I honestly don't know why. It was just something that was exciting and interesting, and I continued to follow that passion despite doing things like going to law school because I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. And fast forward to today, I run largest publication of its kind in the country, and I'm just run off my feet doing all kinds of stuff, be it research for Retail Council of Canada, working with the University of Alberta. It's a lot of fun. Yeah,
you're a prodigious generator of content, I mean, on a weekly basis, right, daily. So if anyone's not by any chance subscribing, by all means, Craig, you do a great job covering the retail scene. So let's get into the shopping center study. Not our first year doing it together. Why don't we start out with a little bit about how you accumulate that data and what's your starting point as you look at the year of 2019 and how you start to assemble the data that becomes ultimately the report.
Yeah, I mean, I've worked with landlords to acquire this information. So, you know, the top shopping centers in terms of sales per square foot. We look at the visitor count in terms of the annual footfall in the shopping centers. And we haven't done the rankings so much because the shopping centers don't change in size quite so much. But we certainly in the past looked at how large they were as well. And we've got a few that are over 2 million square feet, which is really quite gigantic. So, given, landlords pulling numbers for us for the 12 months that would be ending June 30th, in this case of 2019, we put that information together, and then we really put together an analysis of what we're seeing in terms of what's happening in the industry, how things are changing, what are the latest trends. It's really quite fascinating because shopping centers are seeing a very significant shift, including with JF and Marcel with the Manulife Center. We're seeing a lot of these centers seeing investment right now.
Well, what a great segue to the next question. I mean, the opening segment talked about this intersection of food and all these other elements and what modern retail gathering places look like. So what was your observations for the 2019? I mean, the numbers don't tend to change year over year dramatically, as you said, but you could see, I think, distinct trends. And kind of a two-part question. One is, what did you observe for the 2019 season? What stood out in your mind? And then we'll talk about what you think is happening in 2020 and beyond. But let's start with 2019. What are the kind of the key observations you had about shopping centers in the report?
Yeah, I mean, despite the narrative that there's a retail apocalypse, I wouldn't say that was so much the case in Canada at all. There are some challenges, but a lot of the top shopping centers actually saw increases in their sales per square foot, which is quite remarkable. Park Royal that's in West Vancouver, saw an absolutely incredible increase of almost 47% in 1 year. Definitely a record breaker. I've never seen that in the 4 years that I've done this study.
Let's unpack that for a bit. What causes that kind of increase? Is it a new anchor tenant? Is it a connection like in Ottawa? They connect the tram. Like what would drive such a year-over-year increase?
I was told that it involved some less productive retailers exiting the center and more productive retailers coming in. The shopping center added a VIP Cineplex cinema, which is driving traffic as well. And I think overall creating that, as we've heard earlier today with speakers, creating that mix that's going to get people in and stay and shop is what's really leading to the success in that shopping center. It's also a stunning center right by the ocean. If you've never been to West Vancouver, it's definitely something worth visiting. Very highly successful shopping center. But what we're seeing is, the landlords that have the top shopping centers are really investing into them. They're making them look good. They're bringing in great retailers. They're also, bringing in experiences and things that are going to make people want to come in. Because if you think about it, if you can shop online, what's going to make you, put in the effort to go out and actually, frequent a physical space? It's got to be something that you want to be at. And if a landlord or a retailer isn't offering that, there are chances they may not be successful.
So if you could tease some of the numbers for us, even just beneath the trends, would you say we looked at the top 30? I remember in the 2018 study, I think 3 of the shopping malls' productivity decreased, but the others stayed flat or actually went up. And I believe that was in those 3 was because the Sears had exited in that particular time. What does it look like this year in your mind? Did you see increases across the board or some pluses and minuses? Reflecting on that, what did you think?
There were a few pluses and minuses. We did see a few shopping centers that saw some slight decreases, but that could be due to all kinds of things. It doesn't mean that those shopping centers specifically are just having a bad time. It just means that perhaps some retailers, like say Forever 21, we're struggling a little bit.
Sure.
So you never want to read too much in terms of saying, well, the shopping center's on the way out. I definitely wouldn't say that. In fact, some very successful shopping centers have seen little minor decreases, but it's really just kind of playing around with the concepts and trying to drive those numbers up. Retailers do come and go, and ultimately, the top 30 shopping centers and those that aren't necessarily on the list are quite successful.
Right. Yeah, I was interviewed for an American podcast, and we were comparing the two countries together. And of course, there's some big differences in store closure, and generally we all know that's just overbuilding in the U.S. more so than a general trend. But one of the things we talked about was the strength of shopping malls in Canada. My hypothesis, amongst others, and I'd love to hear yours, was that really, A, you have very savvy landlords and very savvy operators, and B, that you have the opportunity to look south and have a little bit of a crystal ball and say, what are the trends that we can see happening, plus or minus, that are also going to resonate here in Canada? Would you say that's characterizes our shopping center operators in both those regards?
Absolutely. We've got some world-class landlords in Canada. We also have less retail space per person than in the United States, which kind of helps as well. We've got some very, very strong shopping centers as well. And Canadians, in a lot of respects, are actually still shopping. I've spoken to retailers that have stores in the United States and Canada and are saying that they seem to be happier with their Canadian retail operations, which is really quite interesting, because if you look at our cost of living, our incomes are less, taxes are higher.
Less disposable income, generally speaking, right?
Yeah, generally speaking. But, Canada actually has a lot of people with money. I was doing some research, and per capita, we have more households with a net worth of in excess of $30 million than in the United States. So that
really?
That whole inequality narrative in the States, maybe we're a little more unequal up here in Canada. We've got some very rich people. Just go to Yorkville or in the evening and check out the restaurants.
So let's get back to the trends of 2019. I mean, one of the things you and I talked about over the course of the year, and we see it in food districts. Let's talk about food and its relationship. I mean, if we look back in history, 20 years ago, there was a food court and maybe some restaurants attached in the parking lot, but that's really evolved in the past number of years. Talk about that for a little bit on what you're seeing. It's a little bit 2018, 2019, but talk about that as an influencer, and is it successfully driving traffic and the right metrics in these shopping malls?
I would say for the most part, we're seeing landlords dedicating more square footage to food and beverage options. people like to Instagram what they're eating. Food will bring people to a shopping center. They'll come more often. They may stay longer. For sure, we're seeing more square footage being dedicated to food and beverage. We've seen, food halls that are opening in suburban shopping centers as well as in downtown cores. It's a huge thing. We're also seeing full-size restaurants opening in shopping centers. Years ago, you say when I was living in Saskatchewan, maybe our local mall had a Smitty's restaurant.
Sure.
Now you're seeing Big Kegs and Moxie's. Yorkdale has Cheesecake Factory. Bubba Gump Shrimp is at West Edmonton Mall. These are these big, large, restaurant concepts. Shops at Don Mills. I should say CF Shops at Don Mills. Again, has amazing restaurants. I think that's what's actually driving a lot of the traffic to certainly some of these shopping centers anyways.
And would you say in some part that's replacing a traditional, like it's hard to get anchor tenants of size these days. There's not a lot of department stores left. So is that their role, is the role of attracting people to that mall and then getting them into the aisles and getting them into the retail stores? Is that how they're thought of? By and large, you think?
I would say so to a degree. I mean, the new anchors are going to be, if a restaurant concept is, large enough to drive traffic. Again, with entertainment centers, be it a movie theater or the rec room, that sort of thing. Food halls, we're starting to see these open up quite a bit. Also, entertainment centers. One thing we're going to see in 2020 is several very interesting entertainment concepts open within some Canadian shopping centers, and this is sort of the new wave, but we'll talk a little bit more about the redevelopment of shopping centers. It's quite incredible how many shopping centers are going to have homes on site in terms of condominium and rental apartments.
Well, let's go there. So let's talk about 2020. Live, work, play, shop. What do you see? Unpack that for us. So the mall's happening and putting together and redeveloping. What are you seeing on the horizon for 2020 and beyond in terms of what's next?
Yeah, ICSC did a study, and I think it said 87% of Canadians would like to live in a work, live, play environment, which means that they may be open to living near or actually on a shopping center property. I mean, it's a little more high density, but and this is actually a significant increase. So people are starting to see that convenience in their lives is important. They want, a full experience. Our cities are very congested, so commuting is not something that's generally pleasurable. Toronto, I think, was ranked the most congested city in North America. Vancouver's quite congested. Montreal sure is. I've been there, and it's been hard to get around sometimes. So, we have less time, and being able to, say, live in a shopping center, in a condominium building that's attached, I think is really smart. I stayed in the Fantasyland Hotel in West Edmonton Mall, and it was great because I didn't have to go outside. I had my grocery store, drugstore. It was just a very convenient experience, and I can see why people would want this. So, many of the shopping centers, particularly, in the Toronto area and in Vancouver, but pretty much across the country, are seeing redevelopment where they're adding, condominium buildings. RioCan, with its RioCan Living Initiative, is adding, rental housing.
RioCan kind of went all the way to the far end of that, right? They almost decided to exit retail and really go into development, but they're close to marrying those two together still, right, in some of their properties.
Absolutely. I mean, they still have retail in these projects. It may not be quite the same as they were before, which in the case of some of these RioCan properties, that's probably a good thing. They're building something a little bit more dynamic. It's dense. It's a place to live. I think it's quite exciting. In fact, Victor Gruen was the inventor of the shopping center, and his vision was to have a complete community, sort of a European, square where people would gather. There'd be a place for people to work. There'd be a place for people to live. Obviously food and beverage. But the original shopping center developers in the 1950s kind of just ran with the whole, leasing the commercial part of the shopping center. They saw that they could make money doing that. So, Victor Gruen, before he died, was, generally quite unhappy with what he'd seen in terms of how shopping centers had developed as, pure retail centers. So we're actually kind of seeing his vision coming to life now in terms of, if you look at, say, for example, Scarborough Town Centre, I was blown away by the fact that I think there's a plan to add about 36 residential towers to that site, and we're not talking about demolishing the shopping centre. These would be built around it. And if you look at that, what's happening is Scarborough Town Centre is going to become a town centre. It's going to become one of the most populous downtown cores, if you can call it that, in Canada, which is quite phenomenal. The shopping centre alone could see close to 30,000 people living on the site. I'm estimating that given the number of units we might see in a tower. Wow. But I think that's quite fascinating. When I was doing research for this study, because there's a long section on, the 10, 20, 30 plus year, outlook for the shopping centers, I didn't realize how many were actually slated for redevelopment. But it makes sense because number one, they're enhancing the retail, but I think almost more importantly, they're capitalizing on density to make more money from housing, because some residential developers can make a lot of money. So this is a way to extract value from the property while also redeveloping to create something that's also going to be interesting from, a retail and gathering standpoint. So this is actually shaping our cities. This is the future of Canadian communities, is actually more downtown cores, which are being developed from current shopping center sites, which are well served quite often by transit. They've already
infrastructure generally well placed, and
absolutely. I mean, if you think about it, the residential development on a lot of shopping center sites is absolutely brilliant. These developers are going to make an absolute fortune, and it's going to be, I think, better for society. I'd love to live in a place connected to a shopping center if I chose to live in the suburbs. I live downtown.
Of all people, I can imagine you would gravitate to that.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I live in a downtown core already, which is sort of somewhat similar. I live literally above a bunch of stores, so
you won't be far from stores.
Yeah, it's good. I can already confirm that. I'm a test case.
It works for you. You're really picking up on a couple of trends, which is this 100-year trend to urbanization. I was looking at a chart that tracked urbanization for 100 years, and it's really just exactly flipped on its head. Where now, 82% of Canadians live in urban areas. And the other observation that you reminded me of is this paradox of online shopping, which is creating inconvenience in the downtown. I was reading an article about New York and Manhattan, and to the degree that Manhattan is what is potentially a future for our larger cities, 1.5 million deliveries a day on those streets. Plus, you put ride share, and you can't move. It's very hard to get around. So I guess in some ways it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. This unexpected or unintended consequence of online shopping is it's creating more inconvenience to actually get around. So it sounds like the shopping centers. I asked 2020, but you're talking 2040. That far out. So you think that if you and I were sitting here 20 years from today, that would be something that you would expect to see across the country in the urban areas, this live, work, play, shop?
Absolutely, and I'm hoping that technology will help with deliveries. I think drone deliveries being tested out on the West Coast with London Drugs, for example. The future may involve autonomous vehicles. If you look years down the road, I think our cities are going to look quite different. And being a consumer society, retail is still going to be a key part of that. So. As society shifts, as we see more, technology merge with our daily lives, in some cases I say, look to places like China and South Korea in terms of, how retail is being done, how developments are. It's, I think, the future to some degree of what we're going to be seeing here in Canada. The Oak Ridge Shopping Centre on the west side of Vancouver is going to be, I think, unlike anything that we've seen in Canada to date. It's kind of the future of the mixed-use center, which includes, obviously retail as well as everything from, schools, food halls, residential. It's just going to be a very, very exciting place to be. So I'm really, really excited about the future because our current shopping centers, which, in some cases may be a bit uninspiring, are going to become these new vibrant centers that people are going to be able to go to. And if you look at the population growth in Canada, we're going to need it. Again, speaking to the GTA, the city of Toronto alone added more than 77,000 people within its city boundaries last year, and I believe more than 125,000 in the metro area. And I know that
it feels like it on the subway, that's for sure.
Absolutely. I mean, we may be growing too fast. I'm personally excited about it. We need infrastructure to be able to keep up. But, the world is changing really quickly. And if anything, we are seeing innovation here. But, as we just heard from, OTT Pay, we're probably a little behind the times. I think that, other countries in some cases, particularly in places like Asia, I think have really progressed in the future of retail as well as development. And I think that we're going to be seeing more of that as well. So that's why travel is a good thing. You get a perspective on, what can be and what can be done.
Well, let's adjust the lens a little bit from what you think the shopping center future is and what it is, and as we reported in 2019, let's talk about advice for retailers. So pulling all this together, we have property owners and mall owners working hard to bring people together to make their environment exciting. But what's your advice to the retailers in the room and the retailers listening to both of our podcasts about how to take advantage of that? What are some of these best practices you're seeing in terms of how retailers should set themselves up for success in shopping malls across the country now and in the future?
Yeah, I mean, I think that retailers, if they're going to have a physical space, which I think is important, it has to be experiential. That experience can be anything from great customer service to a really interesting looking space, just depending on, the retail concept.
It can't all be Eataly, right? I mean, all retailers can't all be Eataly, but
they could try, but even so, no, everyone's going to have their different thing. A mom and pop store can offer a great experience.
Right on.
Having, the ability for the consumer to get what they want, when they want it, and how they want it. I think that's going to be important. Instant gratification is quite often important, but being able to say pay quickly, be able to get the item that they want. Maybe something's going to be shipped to their home. I think convenience is going to be huge. I also think
that's the paradox of all these. What we talk about, right, is the role of physical shopping centers in this blurring of the channels, right, where they're both dropping off and picking up. You see that with the Nordstrom concepts that they open up with. Doesn't feature any product. It's really just for dropping off returns and doing BOPUS, picking up. You see that as a role as well in this intersection of these two shopping behaviors, right?
Absolutely, yeah. Shopping center landlords, what can they do better? Well, I mean, they're adding more, entertainment. I think this is the next big wave. There'll be a few announcements coming up pretty soon, I believe, for a couple of shopping centers in the GTA, having really interesting entertainment concepts. I won't say much. I think it's confidential, but, Cirque du Soleil is coming to Vaughan Mills, for example.
Right.
That's very, very interesting. I do track international retailers coming into Canada, and I know that a lot more are looking at coming to Canada.
And there's already been, I've lost track of the numbers, close to 50 plus international retailers that have opened up in Canada in the past 2 years. I mean, you've been keeping track of that. Is that number more or less about right?
Yes, absolutely. More than that in the past 2 years, for sure. I just found out about another one last night. It's actually starting off in Regina, Saskatchewan as a franchise. It's a Chinese variety store. I'm constantly learning about this. On Thursday, we'll be reporting on a Chinese concept, a sports concept that's, coming to Canada. But at the same time, though, this is, I think, a concern to some Canadian retailers because we're becoming a global society, and the best concepts in the world to grow are going to look to expand around the world. Right. Canada is looked at, as a safe country. It's a growing country. We've had international retailers, I think, since the beginning of time in Canada. Well, maybe not the beginning of time, but
it's good beta test if they're thinking about the U.S. market as well. We're not. There's more similarities and differences between the U.S. market, so not a bad launching point, right?
Absolutely, but ultimately, if retailers that say are from Canada are not offering the same experience, or not, I guess I say putting on their A game in terms of being competitive with these international retailers, they could stand to fail, unfortunately.
So not a lot of margin for error, right?
No, I mean, retail is hyper competitive, and it's getting more so. I mean, this is very much a competitive sport, and it's going to get much more so. A lot of international retailers want to come into the country. There's some really big names, and they're ones that you may not actually think would come to Canada. So as this happens, we're going to see, Canada's a country that's growing. There is still an affluence, but, there may be some drop-off in terms of certain chains. Some international chains may pull out of Canada. Some Canadian retailers, unfortunately, may not survive this situation. But ultimately, it's an extremely dynamic time where Canada's retail scene is changing. International retailers are coming into the country, and but still we're seeing a lot of success stories here in Canada. Aritzia, Lululemon. We've got some really great homegrown retailers here that are still very successful, and I think it'll be very, very interesting to watch over the next decade because I'm predicting colossal change. I think that as
more change than we're seeing today.
Absolutely. I think that the retail industry is going to look very different. Just go on YouTube and look up the Hema grocery store in China. It's sure. I think we talked about this. It's very, very different experience, I think, than what we're used to now. So, it is exciting, but it's really going to take a lot of investment, a lot of thought. I think that, the future is going to be exciting, but quite different.
If there were lessons to be learned, it's interesting picking up that thread because Kevin started us off this morning talking about, retail strong, but it's very spiky, right? In terms of, winners, losers. It sounds like what you're projecting is that international retailers are going to come here, and I think they've learned the lessons where they're measuring twice and cutting once. They're not opening dozens of stores on day one. I'm surprised they're going to Regina, Saskatchewan to open their first store, but it's probably not a bad place to learn the prairies. Maybe you influence that given your prairie roots. So where can retailers look for lessons? You know, we all try to think in our market as international retailers come here. How can retailers, mall operators, and people in the retail industry look globally? And where should they look for kind of pointers in what could be the future? Because it's out there somewhere, right? You've talked about in past years, hey, look at the United Arab Emirates, what malls that they're building. Look down in Mexico. Look into Russia, which for many years was a fast-moving, developing, move into capitalism. Any tips on where they should be looking beyond our borders?
Yeah, I mean, those places, absolutely. Look internationally. But also think locally, because a lot of these international retailers aren't going to have that human experience. Are they going to know your name? Are they going to ask you about your kids? I mean, I think that independent retailers still have an opportunity to really engage with their locals, which at a time where things are becoming a bit impersonal, that is a way to personalize things. But at the same time, with artificial intelligence now, I think I don't know if you've seen the movie with Tom Cruise. He goes into the Gap store in the future and they know his name. I actually think they got it wrong, but there's very much I think we're going to see a personalization in terms of technology knowing who we are and what we want.
More Minority Report than anything else. I think
that's the movie. Yes, absolutely. But at the same time, though, I think having that personal experience. If I go into a store and the person knows my name and knows something about me, I mean, it's comforting. It's good. It can build loyalty. Human relations are, I think, far more valuable than we realize, especially as we have our faces in our phones now, and the world becomes, I think, a little bit less impersonal. Having that face-to-face interaction, I think, is quite valuable. And having those human connections, I think, is, certainly one tool for retail success, be it, a retailer itself or a shopping center, restaurants, etc.
A study just published by A.T. Kearney talked about the Gen Z cohort, the younger cohort, which is a very big group of population, and that they liked shopping and going to malls as a break from social media, because social media was just so overwhelming. I mean, we know some of the negative stats around social media and what it's doing to youth, and they looked at shopping as one of those ways to just take a break. It's interesting, right? Everyone's there with their phone doing the Instagram and participating, but it's a way to get back to the roots, in other words. So I guess, last couple of questions. Advice to shopping mall owners. You're in there every day. You're advising them today. So we talked about retailers, but what should they do to help amplify their experiences to deliver for their retail partners? What's the 1, 2, or 3 key things that you see today and moving forward that they should be focused on? Yeah,
I would say having a mix of retailers that people want to shop at. Investing in the centers to make them pleasant places to be, essentially. That included the interior, having places to eat, hopefully clean and comfortable washrooms, just things that are going to make the overall experience.
Tick the basics, right? You get the
absolutely.
Make sure easier to say than to do, but nail those basics for sure.
Absolutely. I mean, access is an issue to a degree. Some may complain at certain shopping centers they can't find parking spaces. I mean, these are all things that would have to be dealt with. I'm not sure with autonomous vehicles what the future of that's going to be like. Again, I think there's a lot of wait and see here in terms of how things are going to be changing, but creating places like that. Someone like Yorkdale. I just went last week to this Kit Kat store. I mean, talk about what an experience.
Tell us about that. Tell us about Kit Kat.
Fascinating. I mean, I think to a degree it's the future of retail. Certainly for certain types of retailers. I mean, you go in there, you have an experience. It's fun. It's loud. It's cheery. It involves chocolate.
It's the chocolate bar. It's the Kit Kat store.
That's right, Kit Kat chocolate bar. Just a very, very interesting experience. Same thing with Eataly. I've been there as well. It's very much you're going in and you're having an experience. People are posting it on social media. This is still a thing that's being done. I don't know if that's ever going to go away again, and would need a crystal ball to determine that. But,
sure.
Having something in terms of a physical experience that people want to go to, they're going to enjoy themselves and they're going to interact with however we're going to be interacting in the next 5 years, be it social media or otherwise, I think is quite critical, I think, for landlords to look at. And now we've got, landlords like Cadillac Fairview that, have tech companies built within looking to remove the friction points within the overall consumer experience, which I think is really exciting. Oxford launched an app where you can see what's in the stores, or you can go on the website and type things in. And we're starting to see this merge of technology where it's blurring the lines between physical retail and online. But ultimately, as you said, with like the Generation Z, they are looking for a physical experience. So if you're able to provide that, they're going to part with their money, whatever's left after, our high cost of living to actually make these shopping centers successful. So overall, I think it's a really exciting time for retail and for shopping centers, and even for downtown cores as we see a continued urbanization in Canada. But we're starting to see that urbanization in the suburbs. If you go to Mississauga, Square One is kind of the heart of downtown. There's civic buildings around it, but it's really become the downtown core, and we've seen this in other countries like China as well, as they've grown and they don't have these traditional main streets, that we've seen in communities that have developed over time. So, it's a really interesting time, I think, as our population grows and as our cities get bigger, and as shopping centers play a key part in that overall development within, the world of our urban experience.
Right on. That's a great way to wrap up the conversation from that perspective, because you're kind of getting back to where it began, which is urbanization and the role of shopping centers. So our shopping center report, Retail Council of Canada Shopping Center report, due out in December. So look for that, everyone, when it's available. And if people want to get a hold of you or learn more about you or talk to you or find some of your media properties, where do they go?
Yeah. I've got a website, www.retail-insider.com. Feel free to email me. My email's on there. My face is on there. Hopefully I still look like my photo. Maybe not. I'm not wearing a blue suit today, but I don't have that jacket anymore. I welcome people to reach out. Thank you so much for coming today.
Well, thanks so much for sitting down, and thanks, of course, all of you, and for being on the Voice of Retail and the Retail Insider podcast, and thank you for sharing your insights, and we look forward to reading the report and hearing more in 2020 and beyond.
Thank you.
Thanks. Sean, welcome to the Voice of Retail. How are you doing today?
Good, Michael. Thanks very much for having me.
Well, it's a real treat to be able to sit down and chit and chat with you. Such great experience in retail, and I'm excited to talk about shopping center retail because it's such an important part of the retail ecosystem. But and you and I have known each other for a number of years, but for the benefit of the listeners at home, give us a sense of your personal journey, your professional journey, and a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So graduated out of marketing and quickly got into the entrepreneurial world. I started my first venture, which was in the retail e-commerce space, and building a retail gift card marketing company, and building that to one of the largest in North America, and eventually having that acquired. Then created a company called Trend Trunk, which was the largest peer-to-peer fashion marketplace in Canada. We're fortunate enough to be on Dragon's Den, so we did a deal with Kevin O'Leary on TV.
Mr. Wonderful himself.
Mr. Wonderful himself, and he was wonderful despite everything that maybe people think. So grew that business and eventually joined 5 years ago. Joined Stitch It Clothing Alterations, which is head office based in Burlington, and they're one of the largest alterations retailers in North America, with 85 stores. And now, since then, have jumped back into the entrepreneurial world and started a company called Engagement Agents.
So it was there, and I know a little bit of your backstory, so it was there and through your experiences you realized this opportunity. Unpack for us a little bit about Engagement Agents and what that connection is between retailers and shopping malls. Where do you play a role and how do you help?
Sure. So Engagement Agents is a software platform that makes it really easy for retailers to engage the shopping center's marketing channels that they're all paying for one way or another as part of their leases. So whether that's built into the total lease dollars, their common area maintenance fees, percentage rent agreements, mall marketing, promo advertising funds, one way or another, the retailers are contributing to the collective success of the shopping center and their mutual retailers. But the challenge is that 90% of the retailers aren't taking advantage of those investments that they're already paying for.
So these are the kind of the marketing programs that are there for the taking. In one way, they're there to be taken advantage of. In another way, they're paying for them anyway, and they may or may not be taking advantage of them. I know as a retailer, when I was overseeing a mall-based retailer, there's a lot of work because you're in a lot of malls and you have a campaign, but you need to get it out to many, many retailers. And that means, many, many shopping malls, many marketing people, and then it becomes a decision of who that work falls to, right? In your experience, whether is it the store manager or the marketing people, I guess the experience is it could be both or it could be neither, right?
So it really varies. I think no two retailers are the same. So some retailers will have their store managers doing it. And whether that information gets executed by the store manager or executed by the shopping center is really to be determined. And then the other question, I think, for most retailers is, do they really want 100 store managers doing the same thing for an hour every week when they could be selling $500 more on the sales floor in that period of time? Or some retailers might put it on the responsibility of the marketing team or a marketing person. But exactly as you mentioned, is the problem then becomes, if I'm a 100-store retailer or 1,000-store retailer, how do I get my content out at scale? Because by the time my weekly campaign starts and ends, I might just be getting out to the last set of the shopping center, so the campaign's over.
Right.
So with engagement agents, what we've done is we've made it really easy through our software for the retailers to basically put in their content or their marketing campaigns once, and then our system manages the distribution out to the shopping centers to make it easy for the retailers to get out their content, but also at the same time make it easy for the shopping centers to get that content from the retailers. Because one of the other common problems or challenges that's out there in the market is the general shopping center will go out to the store managers by default and ask them, okay, tell us what's going on for Boxing Day because we want to promote it. And the general consensus with a lot of the shopping centers is it's like pulling teeth trying to get the content because they might be going to the store manager who might not have the power or have the content available, and then they've got
the assets or whatever.
Exactly,
right?
Or the assets, and then they've got to go to the district manager who's got to go to the VP, and by the time it goes to the marketing team, Boxing Day is coming on. So there's all these lost opportunities.
Interesting. So you don't stand between retailers and the shopping malls. You're really a facilitator of that content flow, that workflow, really. Is that a fairly accurate description?
Yeah, so what we've done basically is taken all the intricacies from every shopping center, because no two shopping centers are the same, and we've put it all together for the retailer to make it easy for them to know what they need to get out. And our system or platform will basically act as a air traffic controller, if I can use that analogy, to make it easy for the retailer to get out their content in minutes instead of days or weeks.
And that's across Canada? Are you also in the U.S.? It was just across Canada.
So we're working not only in Canada, the U.S., we're also working with international retailers because based on our research, retailer or shopping center pretty much worldwide is encountering these same challenges. So there's lots of opportunities that we're helping retailers to monetize those marketing channels.
So walk me through a scenario where a marketing person or a store person wants to engage in your tool. Do they go and select the malls they're in? Is it as simple as that and kind of go from there and upload content? Is that a fairly succinct description? Or
very, very succinct. So in a nutshell, what happens is that we set up the retailer with their account. We build out all the parameters for all the different shopping centers they're in so the retailer knows what they need in terms of content. And literally it takes a retailer 5 minutes to push out their content, whether it's to one shopping center or to 500 shopping centers. And we've made it really easy for the retailer so that they don't have to worry about all the little intricacies of what shopping center A needs versus shopping center B. Our platform takes care of it all for them, so it's super seamless. They just know that the content's getting delivered and, more importantly, that it's also getting executed, because that's another challenge that I think retailers have faced is in doing this sort of the old-fashioned way, if you will, where they might just do a spray and pray blast out to their shopping centers. They really don't know what happens from there.
Right, unless they hear from the store manager saying, hey, we were in something, or hey, we were not in something. What happened?
Exactly.
Right? That's typically, I remember, again, back to my days, it's hey, there was this great opportunity. I'm thrilled to see you in it. Or conversely, hey, how come we didn't? Well, we sent the material, and you're right, half the work is following up to see if it ever got executed, but halfway through that, you're already on the way to the next program, right?
Yep, and the other opportunity for a lot of the retailers, which I think is also untapped, is what's happening on the shopping center local side. So events that the shopping center might be happening or going on, where now the retailers can easily have that visibility to make those decisions to participate.
Oh, so the information flow is kind of bi-directional, right? So they can go into your platform and see what's going on in the malls that they're in, because not everyone does the same thing, right?
Right, and that's really been, I think, the challenge for a lot of the shopping centers, because, again, they all want the retailers participating. So this makes it easy for them to get those participating retailers, or if they don't want to participate, they can find out right away versus having to follow up with 5 people at the retailer.
Let's get back to the shopping center survey. So, coast to coast survey looks at the top 30 malls, authored by Craig Patterson, and we just listened to him on the podcast talking about the big trends from our interview from the Bricks and Mortar Forum, from Retail Council's Bricks and Mortar Forum. But now that you look at the study and you've had a longer than most opportunity to look at it, what jumps out? Anything surprise you when you look at it and when you look at those trends, and do they resonate with you? And what were your thoughts just about, that's interesting, I hadn't thought of that, or conversely, that's exactly what I see happening on a day-to-day basis?
I think the biggest thing would be in terms of the sales increase. I don't think every retailer is necessarily seeing that. And obviously that's a whole other conversation in terms of different retailer variables. But I do believe that if you look at, for example, so we did our own report over Boxing Day as an example. And there was 9% of the retailers at the top 10 shopping centers in Canada that were engaged with the shopping centers marketing channels, which means 91% of the retailers didn't have any mention of what was happening on Boxing Day within their shopping centers marketing channels, which is missed opportunities.
So when you went to the shopping centers content and marketing, most were absent from it.
Correct. So whether it was the shopping center's website, their app, their mobile site, their email marketing campaigns that they pushed out, unfortunately, a lot of retailers weren't there.
Right.
And arguably they should have been, because on Boxing Day, I think it's safe to say pretty much every retailer has something to promote, and they want to get people in the door and shopping as soon as they can.
You know, when you look in the survey and you see those productivity numbers, most went up in most malls. Are you seeing that traffic in the malls and retailers being able to grab that traffic and get it across their threshold?
So the retailers that we're working with, we believe were contributing to their success. And I think part of that would have to do with the marketing efforts of those shopping centers. So if I'm a retailer at Eaton Centre and I can get my word out about what's going on over and above my competitors, then arguably that retailer has the competitive edge. So on Boxing Day, some customers might go and shop at that retailer before the retailer where they don't know what's going on.
It's just, if nothing else, and it's a lot else, it's another element that needs to be in place or can be in place, then you're making that easier for everyone. Give me your top 2 or top 3 tips for retailers in terms of driving store traffic.
Finding that a lot of the retailers are now starting to explore more opportunities with their shopping centers than previously. And I think that is also because of the shopping centers are starting to rely on more data and start to collect more data. So, for example, if you walk into a mall, they might try to get you to sign up to their Wi-Fi or download their app or follow them on social media or sign up to their email address list or campaigns. All of that content is really content that's part and parcel driven by the retailer's content to know what's going on at the mall or the shopping center to drive people back into the shopping center.
Right on.
So, for example, on the night before Boxing Day, so Christmas Day Eve, there was a lot of shopping centers that pushed out email campaigns to say, hey, our mall opens at 6 a.m. Here are some of the great offers that are going on. And that's the content that's getting people into the shopping center. Recent success stories is one retailer, we were able to help them increase their traffic by 29%. Another retailer, we were able to help them increase their traffic by 5%. So again, I'd like to think that we're contributing to the growth of the retailers' marketing efforts and traffic and sales into the stores. Right. Also very important for the retailers is, as you mentioned, is that consistency. So I think one of the significant benefits of our platform is we give those retailers the opportunity to have their content to make sure it's consistent, current, compliant with their branding campaigns. And to your point about the store managers, which we were talking about earlier, is most retailers are trying to get away from that decentralized model and having it centralized. So taking that workload to this point, one less thing off 100 store managers' plates to do. And now there's some visibility and control over what's happening versus leaving it up to 100 different store managers to do who knows what.
Yeah, I like the idea that it's the best of both worlds. In the one hand, you have that uniformity and you've got that productivity. On the other hand, you still have the store manager freed up theoretically to do the local initiatives that matter in their own community over and above the broader marketing campaigns, right? So instead of having to do both, you can still have that kind of uniformity of campaign and then participate in some other smaller events.
Yeah, and I think just to add to that, and just to also clarify, is we don't think that there's not an opportunity for that store manager to be involved in some of those local opportunities, but for the typical national or countrywide type of campaign, a lot of that stuff can be just like the workflow can be optimized, and that's where a lot of the retailers we work with see that value.
If listeners want to learn more about engagement agents or get in touch with you, how do they do that?
They can go to our website, so it's engagementagents.com, or if they want to connect with me on LinkedIn, just look up Sean Snyder.
Well, fantastic. Well, thanks for sitting down with me here at the Voice of Retail. It was great to see you again. We'll be seeing each other, I'm sure, again at different conferences around the world, and I wish you all the best, and we'll touch base with you later in the year to see what the latest trends are in shopping centers.
Well, thanks very much, Michael. I really appreciate it.
Thanks to Craig and Sean for being my guests on this episode. Well, now let's hit the highlights of retail news in Canada and around the world with a Retail This Week. So kicking off with a great article from the Toronto Star. How does a supermarket decide where to open in Toronto? So interesting article. The T&T downtown Toronto had to close, and now Tina Lee and her team have to find a new 30 to 40,000 square foot store with adequate parking and all those other things. Not a lot of space left in Toronto to go looking for that. So it's a great article about the ins and outs of trying to find space for that very successful retailer. Loblaw bids to take over New Brunswick cannabis sales. So I guess New Brunswick government has put up cannabis sales up for auction or up for RFP again, and many bidders, including Chiaro, I saw, our friends at Chiaro. But Loblaw here is talking about putting in a bid to, or has put in a bid for the Cannabis New Brunswick sales. Things Engraved CEO blames online retailers such as Amazon's for the company demise. So they are no longer, this is really a group. CEO Sean Brock has wrapped Things Engraved up. And so there's a departure, not unusual in the first quarter of any new year for this to be the time when retailers decide that they just can't continue. So we'll probably see a couple of these. In fact, there's another one coming up, a couple of 3 ones already in this report. But that's not unusual for the first quarter, the first couple of months of the year. Canadian athleisure brand Lole expands into men's and travel categories. So this from Craig Patterson, who we've just heard. His Retail Insider talks about their expansion, Lole brand expansion. Interesting company based in Montreal and mix of wholesale and retail, all kinds of interesting things. Hudson's Bay, so lots of news in Hudson's Bay, as always. So the financial arrangements look like they're out of the way, and now they look like, or not look like, but they have named a new president of the Canadian department store business. That would be the Bay to all of us. This from the Globe and Mail. Gentleman from Europe who's coming in, lots of experience in running different department store formats and turnarounds, and says he wants to use customer data, including the customer's loyalty program and email lists, to guide development. So we wish him the best of luck, and of course, welcome to the Canadian retail market. Our in-store experience aligned. So this is from Retail Council of Canada. Some great articles in our exclusive retail bricks and mortar edition of Canadian Retailer magazine. And of course, this coincides with the Retail Council of Canada's Canadian Shopping Mall study launch. So we talked about it. Craig and I talked about it. Sean talked about it, and it can be found now on retailcouncil.org. Lots of interesting insights, so be sure and check that out. Retail around the world kicked it off with a fun title, anyway, from the Miami Herald. A store without cashiers, can flying cars be next? So this is a Walmart pilot store in West Miami-Dade store, West Miami-Dade, so to speak, that neighborhood. Same number of workers, about 100. However, instead of swipers and baggers, the checkout lane will feature roving employees, and the rest of employees, the idea is, of course, will add better or more value in and amongst the store. So interesting concept here for sure. We'll wait to see if that launches at that kind of scale in Canada. So it looks like the numbers are in from the U.S. Holiday sales climbed 4.1%. year over year. So this is an announcement and a press release from NRF President Matt Shea. So he says it's a great, strong finish to the holiday season and as he says, a positive indicator of what's ahead. Of course, I just got back from the NRF Big Show. Lots of great interviews there, so stay tuned. Upcoming episodes for many interesting interviews from that mammoth event. Speaking of mammoth investment, or mammoth something, Amazon invests $1 billion in India. This is from Canadian business. He's, I guess Bezos is in India now, and lots of stuff going on in that market. Obviously a huge opportunity, just how to get your arms around it. So far, Amazon's just announced $1 billion in India. Luxury brand Links of London shutting all Canadian stores mid-bankruptcy. So I did say that there's a couple more in this report to go. I put it in international because it's largely an international issue. So they ran into some trouble, misreported revenues, and so anyway, Links of London is no more. The real warning in Target holiday sales. So Target sales disappointed a little bit, but when you kind of pull them apart, disappointed and exceeded in some ways, but when you pulled them apart, it looks like the toy category was the trouble. And, it's an interesting article because it talks about the Toys R Us bankruptcy, removing a lot of those toys in the marketplace and creating, I guess, a negative momentum. And loss, as he said, the article here talks about a loss of incremental and impulse sales. That from CNBC. The whole category here, toys, is struggling a little bit in the States. So we'll keep a close eye on that. Independent Retailers, great article on reserve-based businesses go global as Indigenous entrepreneurs tap into e-commerce. Wonderful story there. That from the Globe and Mail. And St. Lawrence Market in Toronto on Sundays. Angering some vendors. So I guess, the St. Lawrence Market traditionally, for many, many, many years, has not been open on Sunday, allowing people those entrepreneurs a day off. They don't really have a lot of staff. It's often the people who own or run the business, so they're not all that happy about it. The whole other section that we've got here, just kind of in the celebration of, so to speak, or in focus of the stores and shopping and digital and bricks and mortar. First article, the comeback of the brick and mortar store, did seem to be a thing at the past NRF. I guess everybody's got religion. Suddenly they realize stores are good in just a slightly different format. We've been talking about that for years. Cutting-edge retail concepts like Showfields. And by the way, I did have the opportunity to interview the CEO of Showfields. So that'll be coming up on a podcast episode soon. Nordstrom keeps its passion for stores amid broader retail downsizing. Footwear News. Footwear News guys are very particularly happy to quote the guys Nordstrom's talking about the shoe bar on the Nordstrom's, the women's store, the new Nordstrom's women's store, which we toured on this past Sunday. It's a great store, great place to grab a drink. The whole floor is licensed. So I ran into, as I was leading the tour of Canadian retailers or retailers from Canada, I ran into this gentleman who was walking around with looked like a glass of whiskey. And he was kind of curious. He was kind of wandering around. He said, "Hey, what are you guys doing?" And we chatted for a bit. And then he started looking around and goes, "I've completely lost my wife down here." And he said, "I don't really care. I got a nice drink and I'm going to go sit down." So kudos to Nordstrom for focusing on the experience in their own special way. Starbucks, moving on from CTV News, opened a first pickup store only downtown Toronto. That's interesting that I put that together with Nordstrom. I didn't mean to do it, but I guess I should have. Nordstrom as well has local stores where they just do drop off and pick up, and now it looks like Starbucks is going to try the same thing. Bose is closing all of its retail stores in North America, Europe, Japan, and Australia. I guess so. This is the third. If things come in threes, this is the third one in this newsletter. This is in The Verge. I guess they're wiping out all of their physical stores, saying that basically they existed just to show people how to, DVDs and CDs. And at that time, it was a radical idea to have stores, but we don't need them anymore. They're all buying online. So we'll see how that works out. Lots of wholesalers, of course, of the Bose product. And that's a wrap on this edition of The Voice of Retail. If you like this podcast, you can subscribe on Apple iTunes, your favorite podcast platform. Please rate and review, and be sure to recommend to a friend or colleague in the retail industry. I'm Michael LeBlanc, founder and president of Emmy LeBlanc and Company Inc. You can learn more about me on www.emmyleblanc.co or, of course, on LinkedIn. Until next time, have a great week.